Oh, this is just too funny.
No, what's wrong with that answer?
Because the word discern, when I see the word discern anywhere, that's a more of a that's a spiritual word. That's a metaphysical word. That's a word not of the flesh. So like it's of the domain of God. It's not a domain of the physical reality.
Oh, I mean, to discern two things is just to note a difference between them, right? It's just differentiation.
Mm. Okay, so you believe in physical discernment.
Well, no, two ideas, two things, two whatever.
Here, I'd like to give you. I'd like to give you something that the Bible teaches that you might not be aware of, Aaron. We get something for you, Aaron.
I'm trying to be very delicate about this because I want to keep the peace.
You don't need to be delicate.
It's in my nature. I have to be. I've learned to be delicate.
You know, the Bible says that you need to have the Spirit of God to understand the things of the Spirit of God. But I want to DM you something discernible, if that's okay with you.
Okay.
So I'm going to DM you something. I send the wave guy first because that's Discord's capture, so you know it's a real person. This is the Bible says that you need the Spirit of God to understand the things of the Spirit of God. But what I've done is taken the gifts of the Spirit and tried to make it a nice little organized graph, so you may not know what each of these things are, but you can see the differentiations going on.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, show us the graph. I want to see it too.
I already DM'd it to you.
Okay, let me take a quick look.
You already got it.
Yeah, I think I got it. Oh yeah, I got it.
What is it you want me to understand about this?
The differentiation of the gifts of the Spirit.
So I can't understand something about it.
Yeah, you might not understand the complexities of each one of those things, but you can see the differentiations that are going on.
I mean, can the complexities be explained in English?
There's English words that are used, so yeah, they're one-word explanations.
Yeah, I mean, if I can understand English, then I can understand the explanations.
Yeah, they're one-word explanations. They're definition explanations.
Right, you said I might not be able to understand the complexities, but if the complexities are explained in English, I understand English.
Right. Discernible. Are you lowercase atheist or uppercase atheist?
I don't know what the distinction is, but I definitely think there's no necessary being.
Okay.
Yeah, the idea that certain things can only be understood by certain kinds of people never really made sense to me, because when you discuss them in English. And if the English sentences make sense to you, then they must also be able to make sense to me.
But that's not the point that I was making. The point that I was making is you read that in the text, what does it mean? I put it into a graph to help. That's the point that I was making.
Okay. Why?
Because reading verses out of the text and putting importancy on them things, that involves the essence of who somebody is and how that essence connects with the God that created them.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it's not clear to me why you were thinking about that.
Well, it was just something on my mind.
Okay.
Yes, we're just looking for like your interpretation of the cognitive ability of what you're reading, what you're seeing.
The cognitive ability of what I'm reading?
Yeah, like how you visualize it in your head.
How do I visualize the verse that Learn posted?
Yes.
Yeah,
Does it resonate with you?
I was just merely pointing something out that you might not have been aware of.
Well, I mean, I've read this verse before.
Oh, okay.
Does it resonate with you? Does it resonate with you? Does it do anything for you? Can it be utilized in your life?
Does the graph help put meaning to the text?
Well, I mean, it's just a statement of doctrine, right? Which I obviously don't share.
Okay.
right? Like, I don't think there is a spirit to be giving these gifts.
So,
So
can
I
you
don't I
describe
don't
to me
understand why I'm being asked about this.
to better understand you? So, what do you think you are? What do you think you compromise? What do you think you're made of?
Well, I can name some of the stuff that I'm made of, but like, I don't have a complete list of the stuff that exists or the stuff that things are made of.
Well, I'm not. You don't have to break it down in terms of like carbon and all those elements and things. I'm talking more like the layers of who you are as an entity in this thing called reality. Do you have a layered system of how what you think you are made of?
No.
I don't know what that question even means.
Like, do you only believe that you're just blood and bones, like the physical stuff, or do you think there's more to it than that?
But I think the conditions of being able to think about stuff are things that are only instantiated in a thinker and don't have their own existence. So what I'm saying is, the question of what I'm made of, I think, uh, just isn't entirely relevant to the issues I'm interested in. The question of
Okay.
what I'm made of, I don't know the complete list.
Would you say the chemicals in our brain play a lesser role in the decisions that we make than our intellect?
Like, you're asking about like physical determinism.
Yeah, I guess that would be a variant of something that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I don't think that like pure mechanism is like a full explanation for everything about human experience. No.
So our intellect does play a role.
Yeah, reason giving does. Yeah.
Okay, so
Interesting.
that would include the terminology what we would call free will, right?
Libertarian free will, like I have really strong intuition that towards libertarian free will, but like I'm unaware of any arguments that convince me either way towards compatibilism or incompatibilism or libertarian free will. The only position that like I think I can like flesh out in some serious way is like is compatibilism, but that's fleshing it out, not proving it's real.
I believe more in Republican free will because I think libertarians are a little bit less concerned with others than Republicans would be.
I will
So I would go.
drop the
I
word
would go.
libertarian. By
I would
libertarian
go.
free will, I just mean the
I would
common sense
go.
idea of free
So I
will.
would go with Republican free will.
What does a Republican free will look like?
But by libertarian free will, I just mean like the common sense idea of free will, that you're like completely free.
I don't see.
It's not a political
I
statement.
don't see adding another word to free will does anything to help the situation. It's like when people talk about God, and then they add in this word and they say, "I'm talking about God Almighty," as if adding the word Almighty makes it more specific. When I don't think it makes more specific, I think it makes it less specific. So when people say, "I'm talking about God Almighty," I'll say, "Oh, are you talking about God Most Merciful?" And then they'll go, well, "What do you mean?" That is what I mean. All you need to do is say God, and all you really need to say is free will. Adding libertarian only muddies the water, and so that's why I said Republican free will.
Oh, because it's distinguishing it from another idea of free will. So, like, one idea of free will is um, that like your choices like have no causes, right? It's entirely 100% spontaneously you. Another version of free will is that your choices are caused, but the causation, like the causation is you, right? So uh, one version of free will, your choices are not determined by anything. The other version of free will, your choices are determined, but they're determined by you.
How could your choices be not determined by anything? That doesn't even sound rational.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's like a good argument against what I was calling libertarian free will.
Interesting.
Of course, your decisions are made by you.
So in the other version, the non-libertarian version, um, like there's something before the choice that caused the choice. It's just the thing that existed before the choice was caused it is a part of you, like maybe your values or something like that.
Who gets credit for that?
Who gets credit for what?
For that cause?
Well, the cause would be a part of you. On like this second notion of free will, which people call compatibilist free will, you're the one doing it.
I personally think that arguing free will is the stupidest argument ever. Because if you don't have free will, there's nothing to discuss. And if you do have free will, it's obvious and there's no need to talk about it. So it's the stupidest, it's the absolute most ridiculous thing to argue about.
Discernible. What would be your best argument in support of atheism?
Like, to me, the key one is the failure of the ontological argument, which is just going to mean that there's no such thing as a necessary being. Which means, like, lots of things could exist as a matter of fact, but they don't have to exist.
How did you determine that?
Determine what?
That there's no such thing as a necessary being.
Well, because there's only one argument that claims to establish that, and it's the ontological argument. And I don't think the ontological argument succeeds in doing what it wants to do.
Well, you still haven't told me how you determine that. I mean, you're making an assertion.
Yeah, what's your mechanism?
How exactly did you rule out God?
Well, my answer to your question was I ruled out a necessary being, right? A being that must exist and must exist the way that it does on pain of contradiction. But I don't think there is any being that must exist.
So you're just essentially saying it's incredulity. I don't think it exists, therefore it doesn't need to. Is that what you're saying?
A logically necessary being, to say that it doesn't exist would entail a contradiction, right? So if God's necessary, the sentence, God does not exist, entails a contradiction, but it doesn't. Here's an easy way to think about it. Like, imagine a prison, right? And somebody tells you that inside that prison, there's an ice cream machine. So I'm going to say, I don't know the fact of the matter of whether or not there's an ice cream machine in the prison, but I do know there doesn't have to be. Now, with regards to God, I don't know if there's an omnipotent being or not, but I do know there doesn't have to be. And I do know that if there was one in the past, it doesn't have to exist today or in the future. Right? That's what I mean when I say I deny a necessary being.
Can I ask you a different question that I want to?
I'm still not understanding how you determine that. I mean, you're just asserting that.
The lack of contradiction in negating any particular being.
Is that like some kind of like universal law to you?
A universal law?
Yeah. Do you see that as like a universal law in your reality, in your perception, your purview?
I wouldn't call it a law. I'd just say it's like a capacity, a thing that can be done. You can imagine a being and then imagine it poofing out of existence. That can be done with any being.
Can I ask you a different question? That's in my mind. It kind of relates, but you might not see it as a relating. But I want to ask you a different question, if that's okay.
Okay.
Let's say, obviously we live in this world, and when we look at a house, okay, an actual house, apartment, would you conclude by looking at the house that humans would be a necessary being for that?
Yeah, humans are the cause of houses being built.
So they would be the necessary being for that house to be there.
Yeah, one thing can be necessary for another thing. Like, the only way a house gets physically built is by humans, yeah. Right, like the only cause for houses that any of us know of are humans. and we can describe
that's
how
the same-
humans build houses. But we can't describe how some other cause would make a house, right? Like, I don't think any of us could describe how a hurricane could make a house. And I think for the house question to be analogous to God creating the universe, I think there'd have to be an explanation of how God actually did create the universe, right? To be able to say that the universe is...
When you say how, you mean by what mechanism?
Exactly. Something analogous to like the engineer drawing up the plan and the carpenter cutting the wood. It would have to be something analogous to that. But there is nothing like that.
There is. It's called the Word. God spoketh into being.
Well, presumably God could say, "Let there be light," without creating a universe, right? Like, he could speak those words without creating a universe.
What do you think of humans having the ability to focus in on the past and also think and construct ideas well into the future that far exceeds other living I don't know what to call them. I don't want to say animals, but for a lack of a better word, other living animals on the planet.
Creatures.
Yeah, I mean,
Creatures.
Yeah, that's what animals are. Creatures.
So how would you account for humans having that ability that far supersedes other creatures with regard to having their mind focused in on past events and as much as living in the current here and now, and also focusing on how they want future events to occur far beyond that of other animals? How would you account for that? Chemicals in the brain?
That's... I mean, it's sort of like a logical condition of being able to do that, like memory and projection into the future, and the ability to think, like, if I want to build this, then I must cut the wood in this way, right? Like, that's sort of what you're describing.
Yeah, that would be the mechanism. I was more concerned with the idea of looking at the idea of how something would be in a finished product before you even start.
I think the capacity to imagine the future, like different possible futures, and right, like, because you're talking about like a plan for the future, right, and executing that plan.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. So being able to like imagine a plan for the future and executing that plan, that depends on an ability.
And also looking backwards as well, like cherishing past events in your life and fixating on those in a way that probably other animals aren't capable of doing.
Called transcendence.
Yeah, that's not a bad word for it, actually. So yeah, I don't think that's going to be connected to the stuff we're made of. Like, I think what you're describing are just like transcendental conditions of the kind of thinking that we do. And like those transcendental conditions, like, I don't think they can be connected in some causal way to a physical body.
So we just got lucky that we have them. Roll of the dice.
To me, there's a really important distinction to be made between like a roll of the dice causing something and something taking place for no reason. I think a roll of the dice is a reason. I think our transcendental conditions exist precisely for no reason. So our capacity...
You just see it as a mysterious component.
I wouldn't even describe it as mysterious. I'd say it's like a knowably true fact that transcendental conditions were instantiated in bodies for no reason.
For no reason.
What? That's quite a leap of faith you got there.
Well, like, what's the leap of faith involved in that?
Well, because it's basically a highly emotionally subjectively charged response. You just believe, you have this faith that you just proclaimed as a statement, and I still don't really know how you were able to feel so assertive and confident in this statement. That's all.
Have you ever heard of like the principle of sufficient reason?
Sure.
Yeah, it's the idea that every being and event has a reason why it exists and exists this way and not another way, right? But the thing is, for that principle, for the PSR to hold without an infinite regress, it's going to require a necessary being. It's going to require a being that is its own reason. Does that make sense?
And how do you rule that out, though?
Yeah.
A being that
Yeah.
is its own reason? Well, remember, that was my first answer, right? When I was asked, like, why I'm an atheist. I said there's no necessary being because every being can be thought as not existing without entailing a contradiction.
I don't understand how the word contradiction interplays into what you're saying.
The world can be a coherent place when you, regardless of which being you minus out of it. So if you imagine some being, right, and then imagine it not existing, the world remains coherent. No particular being needs to exist for the world to be a coherent place.
So are we just all a figment of everyone's imagination?
No, it's all real. I mean, so the point of talking about that necessary being is that the idea that everything needs a reason why it exists requires a necessary being. If there's no necessary being, the claim that everything requires a reason can't be true. And I'm just saying one of the things that doesn't have a reason is our conditions of knowledge.
I don't understand how our existence of knowledge doesn't have a reason. I don't understand how you can conclude that.
I mean, you're literally sharing thoughts. Therefore, we have to come to some kind of reason. I mean, that's why we exist. Existence leads to reason.
Yeah,
Therefore, we
our reason
understand reality.
exists.
Therefore, we move through this reality and can execute things.
Yeah, that's true, right? Like our conditions of reason do exist, right? They are instantiated in us. We do think, but they're
But
instantiated in us for no reason.
self can no reason.
I'm sorry?
So it's self-contained, and there's no need for the mechanism of reason for it to simply be what it is.
Yeah, to be clear, when I say there's no reason, I mean there's no explanation for why it exists.
Is it because you choose for there to be no explanation, or something else?
Well, so the first thing I said is that there doesn't need to be an explanation, right? Because the PSR is false.
What's the PSR?
The principle of sufficient reason. So the claim that every being and every event must have a reason why it is thus and not otherwise.
It sounds like some weird, like, abstract placeholder that's outside of his reality, and then he just, I don't.
It almost sounds like you're going from extremes. One extreme is there is no reason, and then the other extreme seems to be there has to be a reason for everything. So either there has to be a reason for everything, or there's no reason for anything. Those to me sounds like two extremes.
Well, the only one of those I deny is that there has to be a reason for everything. That's what I'm denying.
I think that they're both just extremes.
But I'm not denying there are reasons for some things.
But you're basically then saying that it just comes out of nothing, basically.
Well,
it's just
almost
for what it is.
It's not quite that, it's certainly not that nothing causes it, but there is nothing prior that's relevant to it appearing. Yeah.
Are you hearing this? This is trippy.
Well, here's an example of something that would be useless, and there doesn't have to be a reason for it. You want to hear a good example of something like that?
Useless and doesn't have to be a reason for it. I'm not sure why it would have to be useless.
Well, you're ruling out that there has to be a reason for everything.
That's
okay, right? So, what about something that's useless that you don't have to have a reason for? Couldn't you? If there's something that exists that's useless that you don't have to have a reason for, couldn't most other things actually have a reason for, or no?
Oh, just so we're clear, when I say a reason for something, I mean an explanation of why it exists, right? Like
a house. Like the house example I gave.
But we have straightforward explanations of why houses exist, right? Humans make them.
So that would be an example of something that does exist that there would have to be a reason for.
There is a nameable and understandable reason for it, yeah.
So wouldn't that then exclude the idea that nothing has to have a reason for it, the other extreme? Because you're ruling out the one extreme, why wouldn't you be able to rule out the other extreme as well then?
And the other extreme is?
That nothing has to, there doesn't have to be a reason for anything.
Oh, yeah.
The one extreme
there doesn't have to be.
The one extreme is there has to be a reason for everything. And then the other extreme is there doesn't have to be a reason for anything.
Right. The second one is the one I accept.
Now, why would you accept that one?
Well, like, as I said, the claim that everything has a reason is going to require a necessary being. And I deny a necessary being.
What about look at this, the house example. The fact that there's a house example rules out the other extreme. That there doesn't have to be a reason for anything. So that example rules out the other extreme.
Oh,
so the one extreme you're ruling out, the example I give rules out the other extreme.
I'm going to type 2 sentences in chat just so we can be clear here.
Or don't you see it that way?
This should be interesting.
Do you see what I'm saying? Absurdity?
Oh, yeah.
The house example would definitely be an example of ruling out the other extreme. And then I was trying to give you an example of something.
Neutral, it cancels itself out.
There is no reason for anything. There does not have to be a reason for anything.
So, did you see the difference between those 2 sentences?
There is no reason for anything. There does not have to be a reason for anything. They're similar.
The analogy I gave was the ice cream machine in the prison, right? An ice cream machine, a prison does not need an ice cream machine, but I don't know if there is one in the prison or not, right? I don't know if there's an ice cream machine there, but I know there doesn't have to be. I don't know if there's a reason for everything, but I know there doesn't have to be.
I'm not familiar. I'm not following the nuances of the differentiation between those two things that you're making. But here is one of the things that we had discussed. That one is there doesn't have to be a reason for anything. And 2, there has to be a reason for everything. So you're ruling out number 2, that there has to be a reason for everything.
Right.
And I'm saying the example of the house that I'm giving you would have to rule out number 1 the same way you're ruling out number 2, that there doesn't have to be a reason for anything. There would have to be a reason for the house. So that would rule out number 1 as well. Or don't you see it that way?
No, I don't think there has to be a reason for the house. But like the house is the kind of thing that like we have nameable and knowable conditions for, and so we can know the probability of those conditions obtaining such that there would be a house.
So therefore we know there has to be a reason for it.
Well, No, that doesn't establish there has to be a reason for it.
I'm not following your logic.
Cosmological argument?
I'm not following his logic.
I don't know. Here's the thing. When I see the word anything, that means it's a something. Thereby, there has to be reason, because if something exists, then there's reason or logic attached to it. So his premise is just playing from the negative or negative stance, which just doesn't do anything, because I can't. It's just an abstract concept that doesn't exist in reality.
What is an abstract concept?
The negative viewpoint, of something, because we live in a something reality. We live in a reality that there's objects, placeholders, physical things, real energy, like things exist. I mean, we're in a state of existence, so we're in a something existence, and the word anything is a physical property. So I just don't understand how you can say the word no reason. To me, that's is a contradiction. I don't know. I just don't get it.
Well, what is the contradiction?
The word anything. I just explained to you. What is the word anything? What does that mean to you?
Any particular thing, any particular object or
Right.
particular being.
Right. So those are all placeholders for some kind of physical object, even if it's in a metaphysical state that you cannot see with your senses. We know it's a placeholder of something in reality. It's an entity. So if there's entities, if there's objects, if there's reality, if there's physical substrate, then by default there must be a mechanism of logic attached to it, because it doesn't just puff into being without reason. It just doesn't make sense.
That's just question begging.
Yeah, that's what I'm denying.
Yeah. Like, there's no
What do you mean by
contradiction in
question
saying it means you're presupposing your conclusion instead of giving a reason, which doesn't presuppose your conclusion, right? So there's no contradiction in saying that X, in this case, a house, like, that exists, has no reason for it, right? For its existence, like, it could just be a brute fact. There's no contradiction in that.
Right, because remember, contradiction, like non-contradiction, is A can't be not A at the same time and in the same way. But two different moments don't necessarily form a contradiction. So no house, then house, isn't a contradiction.
So wait, no house, then house. So nothing manifested, something manifested.
Yeah, you could say at T1, time 1, there was no house. And at T2, there is a house, and there's no explanation for why that house exists. That's perfectly coherent.
Huh. Hmm. What do you think about that? I have no idea what to do with that. What do you think, Ed?
Like I said, the points, the way I was understanding some of the things that he was saying is, there has to be a reason for everything that he's ruling out. I see something. I could see something that's totally useless that there doesn't have to be a reason for. An example of that would be garbage, and so that garbage would eliminate the idea that there has to be a reason for everything. So I could say garbage is the reason that there doesn't have to be a reason for everything. And then on the flip side, I would say a house, it would mean that there doesn't have to be a reason for anything. That would have to be untrue as well, from the fear factor of a house has a reason. So to say there doesn't have to be a reason for anything would have to be wrong, because houses exist and there is a reason for them.
There could be a reason, right?
So a house would negate premise number 1, and garbage would negate premise number 2. So there's just two extremes, and what is the conversation? It doesn't sound like anything is really being discussed. It's just Just
Well, what is the claim?
Nothing
What is
more
the
than
claim being
philosophy.
made?
Nothing more
It's the
than
claim-
philosophy jibber jabber.
It sounds to me just like we're back to state zero, where things just cancel themselves out. Poof, there was no discussion.
It's just
What's
philosophy.
the original
jibber jabber.
proposition? What's the original proposition on the table?
Originally, I was
in the
asked
chat.
why I'm an atheist,
In the chat.
and my answer was that I deny the existence of a necessary being.
Oh, okay. And the
Yeah,
rebuttal to that was, like, was there an argument for why?
Yeah, it's written in the chat. It's in the chat, side chat.
Oh, okay, let me see.
Who's making the rebuttal?
That's a good question. Yeah, because there's no rebuttal. Because all I'm sensing is poof, we're back to state zero, like nothing happened.
So do you take yourself to have refuted the claim that there's no necessary being?
No, I take the claim that you're creating some strange negated impasse that just disappeared and never. It's like we never had this conversation in the first place. Like
Let's put it
premise,
this
your logic.
way.
Like, I don't know.
Why couldn't there just be like everything that, like, let's take reality, right, being the set of all things that exist. Why can't all of the propositions that pertain to those entities, so like, you know, X exists is true, Y exists is true, and so on. Why can't all those propositions just be contingently true as opposed to any of them, you know, or one of them or more being necessarily true?
Sorry, I've got in real life stuff interrupting. I got to run. Have a good night.
Take care.
Have a good night.
Yeah, so why